Yes! Oh. Well, yeah, it's for cinematic effect. The box was actually already there, but I had to put it out to film it. I'm really excited about what's in this box. We got a drone. Wow. This is a camera that flies. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Having some technical difficulties here. We didn't film all day, even though we did some exciting things like go for a run in the hail, because last night I got this comment and I am so excited about it. This is like the reason why comment sections exist. We haven't been reading the comments very much, but I've been dabbling a little here and there. So this is a response to the video we've posted a couple days ago, He Said No to Sex. It's from Ida Hatmer Higgins. I wonder if you would consider the possibility that exposing your children to your conflicts in the realm of the sexual is placing an enormous psychological burden, weightier precisely because of their youth and inexperience. I realize you probably are doing it precisely because you don't want sex to be supercharged with secrecy, but don't you remember childhood? Exposing them to your talk about it is just incredibly tone deaf and callous. This is one very, very serious problem. The reason why I love this comment so much is because I feel like Ida has a very, very different philosophy and experience about parenting or family or sexuality than we do, obviously. That's great. I mean, we have a lot of a different philosophy than almost anyone we know. Heck, we have a different philosophy than we had 3 years ago. So I think it's wonderful that we can meet people that have different viewpoints than us and that they can be exposed to ours. I like her tone from the very beginning. First of all, she says she's serious, and then she says, I know this is none of my business and we're not gonna listen to a stranger, which you're right about that in a way. So it's kind of saying, hey, like, here's my 2 cents, but we understand the terms here, and that's valuable to me. And then there's like question marks. Some people, when they put question marks or they ask questions, they're really not asking questions, they're just saying something. But I hope that this is a good conversation starter. So we're gonna take it seriously.
I think I felt like, oh shit, is she right?
Ida, I think the issue that you bring up is something that we think a lot about. And it's something that is actually kind of scary to me. You know, because our stance is so unusual or countercultural, both from the Christian culture that we were raised in and from the like standard American culture that we know, it is kind of scary. And I wonder these things all the time, actually. To help understand where we're coming from, understanding our background might be helpful. Mm-hmm. So you use this phrase here, don't you remember childhood? Yeah, we do. I'll tell you about my childhood. I never talked to sex with my parents. I remember talking to them about it once in 5th grade for about 3 minutes when I got busted for something. So it was like kind of a response to, it was a negative experience for me. They did their best and they did a great job, but I felt very alone sexually. And I don't just mean with like experiencing sexuality, but even like understanding it, like things like where babies come from, what makes boys and girls different. And sexuality became something that was very intriguing and deviant to me.
My parents didn't really talk to me about it. I was given cassette tapes and a book. And I remember being really confused when I had sexual feelings for my youth pastor and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't think there were sexual feelings. I felt completely alone and completely clueless when it came to a huge part of who I am, which I am a sexual being.
And our kids are actually sexual beings. I mean, they're not growing into using their sexuality, at least not all of them are, yet. But in terms of enormous psychological burden, I think that can go both ways. And we experienced it in our childhood from feeling isolated and alone. So I don't know. I personally don't feel like we're putting a psychological burden on our kids. In some ways, it's kind of awkward, you know? And they know that, and we know that, just because it's still kind of weird for us.
But we even have boundaries within there where we don't tell them everything. You know, we're not...
Well, not only do we not tell them everything, I don't feel like we really tell them anything in a way. I mean, and if you go back and watch the video again the other day, I think it's interesting to hear exactly what we talked about and what we didn't talk about. We don't need to tell you guys what we are even doing physically. And I think some of that's okay, but we haven't really addressed that much on this vlog. We say like, we had sex. Mm-hmm. So if that's a psychological burden, I think we almost have another question to ask. Like, if that's something we should keep hidden from kids, and if so, what age or why? All we talked about the other day, at least if I think, was our reaction and our feelings to each other around the area of sex. Mm-hmm. But that's not even unique to sex. We have those fights over popcorn and much stupider things, laundry. So you could have substituted almost any topic in there, but we weren't talking about physical descriptions. There was no anatomical reference. There was no nothing like that. Some people believe that you shouldn't expose your children to any fighting or any conflict or any like thing of depth. Mm-hmm. We don't believe that. The things that are really important for us to teach our kids is that sex exists and sexuality exists. For our younger kids, we teach them about these are body parts, these are for you. No one should touch you here, but that doesn't make them wrong or dirty. They're special. We teach them that we are married and we are your parents and we love you and we love each other. And we have this thing called sex that God made. It's good. And it's what makes babies, and it's important to us. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. That's like pretty much it.
And I've had talks with the older girls about how their bodies work.
And I think with some of the older kids, it gets more complicated.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about your body and how to respond to it when it starts initiating more sexual feelings, and how sexuality, the dangers of experiencing sexuality in isolation versus in a partnership and what that's for. The thing I would caution you about is be careful that you're not imposing it being a burden on other people just because it might be a burden on you. And I say this with the utmost respect because this is what I did with my kids. When we first started talking to them about sex, I was like, damn, this is gonna be weird. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't to them, it was just to me. Now, if we were like asking for their advice or sharing secrets with them or like pushing stuff on them that they're not okay with, I think that would be a different issue.
That would be tone deaf, I think, for sure. And that could be very harmful.
Another issue is that they are living in the hothouse of your family culture. This is their entire world. What I can say is that your sexual issues are very particular to you, very unique, and have certain strong skews in certain directions. Some of what I would personally call pathological. They are getting a heavy, heavy, heavy dose of a very particular dynamic. One in which the man within a partnership, a man that is somewhat more dominant and persuasive because highly articulate.
It seems like you're asking this as if it's bad to be in a family with only one dynamic happening. There's like a tone there that's like, oh, they need to be exposed to so much more than just your dynamic.
Families, you know, in general, I think are very limiting. Every family has a culture. I think our family culture is very distinct because we work a lot at that. So it is very separate and it is very isolated in a way. And it is very unusual. I mean, most of our neighbors have been to jail. Very few people are married around here. I mean, multiple marriages, multiple kids without parents. I know that's not like the ultimate benchmark, but I guess I just want to ask the question, what culture are we supposed to expose them to? We're a pretty big fan of fathers specifically, partnered with mothers, leading a charge to create a culture in your family that upholds the highest values for your family.
Which is very counterculture for a lot of reasons. First of all, the man's leading. Our culture likes to have lots of different cultures. We've got the school culture, we got the work culture, and all those take their turn in forming this child. But we believe that actually the culture we create should be the most important and the most charged. We actually believe that that's actually better. You say you're working on your marriage, but to the rest of us, it looks like bullying a lot of the time.
I go to counseling basically once a week, and I go to addiction groups twice a week because I mostly agree with you. Because I could argue on the fine points, but whatever. Let's say that you're right about all those things. I'm not going to argue with it. I have my issues, like, for sure. I don't think that disqualifies me from a dad of doing the best I can to connect with and reach my children. There's this weird viewpoint out there that people believe that you need to be qualified to be a parent. No, you don't. Like, if you look at parents throughout history, we believe God gives you children or not. He actually has control over that. Not everyone believes that, but we do. And if you look at the types of people he's given kids to or allowed to get pregnant, it's like crazy. And I don't really think any of us is qualified to steward and fully care for unconditionally a human life. I mean, that is such a big responsibility. So I hope you don't think that we think we're parents because we're good or that's why we have kids. In fact, if I had to say anything, I would say I was 10 times more of a controlling asshole bully 10 years ago, and having children has changed me and made me a softer and less controlling and more kind and open man. The sad thing is, I feel like that's what's preventing a lot of people from bringing children into the world, is they feel like they're not qualified. They're not qualified because they don't have enough money. They don't feel like they're good enough people. Their genes are off and they're gonna make their kids sick, or the world is such a bad place. I don't think that is what kids are for. I don't think that they are our project to perfect based on our qualifications. To me, that's not how we see children. We see children very simply as a blessing and a gift that God has given us because he loves us so much. So we're thankful. The reason why I liked that Ida made this comment is I think a lot of people actually probably feel these things. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're kind of out there, and maybe you don't believe it as strong as she does, but in certain degrees, I mean, I know I do. I felt all these things. Like, am I just crazy? Mm-hmm. Am I just being a bully or an ass? Or are we pushing too much on our kids?
I go to a meeting once a week to try to be less codependent. I have a hard time saying no, not letting Ben walk all over me. It takes two.
It's so hard because we don't live in a perfect world, and we live in a world of choices. Either we're going to educate our children about sex or someone else is. In our case, someone else did. We would wish another way.
Positive.
Yeah. The main reason why we bring up sex with our kids is to let them know, hey, that's the thing that you talk to mom and dad about. That's the first lesson we teach them. And I don't think there's any age too young to teach that. And then from older, you don't want to be explaining like complex anatomy and sexual positions to a 3-year-old. At what age you start bringing in different things? Like, I trust parents to do that.
And I feel like we're right on the cusp of getting real with like our kids getting into relationships with the opposite sex, and I don't want that to be the first time that they hear us talk about sex. They're not going to come to us if that's the first time. Like, that would be too scary.
Even before that, with masturbation and stuff, I think it's a terrible thing to feel like you have to experience it in isolation. It's one thing if you choose it, but it's one thing if you feel like you have no one to talk to. That was the worst thing in my kind of growing up. Thanks for asking that, Ida. I appreciate your honesty and your belief system and just your zeal and pursuing this. I really hope you continue to watch the vlog and bring up these issues, because I love these conversations. Part of the thing, it's like, because then you're like, it's like,
Bye.
oh dang.